Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today we are tackling relationships. We've got a whole bunch of sources to unpack this time, all centered around the work of Dr. Ergen J. Asher.
Oh yeah, he's really interesting.
Yeah, and he's a retired family therapist with like over 26 years of experience. So we're talking audio lectures from his 10-day relationship course, PDFs packed with insights, even real-life stories from his practice. It's going to be quite a journey.
It is. It really is. And what's really interesting here is that Dr. Asher, he doesn't shy away from the tough questions, and he starts his course by asking why couples counseling. You'd think the answer is obvious,
Yeah,
right?
right.
But he points out that a lot of people go into therapy with like the wrong mindset.
Yeah, it makes it think, right, like, are we bringing our work issues into our relationships?
Yeah.
Like, without even realizing it.
Exactly, yeah. So he talks about how some people see counseling as like a chance to just list their partner's flaws, like almost presenting a case against them.
Oh, wow.
But that's not really therapy, right? There's just anger disguised as therapy. And the real change happens when both partners are willing to look at their own contributions to the issues, to the whole relationship.
So it's more about taking responsibility for your own, like, 50% of the relationship.
Exactly, yeah. It's not about placing blame. It's about understanding, your role in the whole thing. He actually uses this analogy. Imagine wearing different hats, right? Like one for work and one for home.
Yeah, okay.
And if you're bringing that like demanding executive type of persona into your family life, it's going to create tension.
Right, of course, yeah.
He tells this story about a husband who he was always bringing work stress home, and his wife finally had to tell him straight up, look, when you come home like that, intimacy is just off the table.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's such a good example of how the energy that we bring into a relationship can affect everything.
Oh, absolutely.
It makes you realize, like, how important it is to, like, be mindful of the different roles that we play in life and how we kind of shift between them.
You got it. And choosing the right therapist. He says that's really important for that whole process. And Dr. Asher really emphasizes that both partners need to feel comfortable with that therapist, regardless of their gender or, background or anything like that. It's about finding someone who can create a safe and productive space for the both of you.
Makes sense. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like any relationship, right? Like,
Oh,
trust and connection are key.
absolutely, yeah. Now let's shift gears a little bit to a topic that can be kind of tough to talk about, forgiveness.
Yeah.
And Dr. Asher doesn't sugarcoat it. He just says straight out, forgiving is so very hard to do.
And I think we've all been there, right? Like,
Yeah.
holding on to anger can almost feel kind of addictive,
Yeah.
even when we know it's not healthy.
It's true. And Dr. Asher really breaks down why it's so important to let go of that anger, not just for the relationship, but for your own well-being too. He says that holding on to anger, it actually harms us, mentally and physically.
Wow.
So think about a time when you held on to anger towards your partner, right? Like, how did it make you feel? How did it affect your relationship?
It's like carrying around a heavy weight.
It
It
is.
weighs down everything.
He shared this pretty intense story about a couple dealing with infidelity and the immense challenge of forgiveness. There was a lot of hurt, obviously, and betrayal, but they chose to stay together and work through it.
Wow, that must have taken a lot of courage and, like a really deep commitment to the relationship to be able to work through that.
It does, and it really highlights that, forgiveness is a process. It's not just a one-time event. It's about making that conscious choice to let go of that anger and resentment, even when it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, and Dr. Asher also mentions that forgiveness doesn't mean you're condoning the action, right? It's more about like releasing yourself from the burden of that pain so you
Yeah.
can create space for healing and growth, and even suggests exploring things like meditation. And he actually specifically recommends Moira Hutchinson's 10-day course on Insight Timer
Hmm.
as a good resource for that.
It is. And it's not just about forgiving your partner, right? It's also about learning to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
Because we all make mistakes, and holding on to guilt and shame, it can be just as damaging as holding on to anger.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like, creating a more compassionate space,
Mm.
within ourselves and extending that compassion to our partners too. Now let's move on to something that I think we can all relate to. Expectations. Dr. Asher dives deep into how these unstated or unrealistic expectations can create a lot of conflict in a relationship.
Right. Oh, yeah. And he uses this really powerful visual to kind of illustrate this. Imagine two hearts,
Right.
right? One is completely full, just devoted to the partner, and the other is divided up into sections, family, work, friends, all that. And Dr. Asher uses this image to show how, when couples have these mismatched expectations about how that heart space is allocated, it leads to big clashes.
Wow. Yeah.
So think about your own heart, right? Like, how is it divided up? Have you ever talked to your partner about, how you divide your heart up?
That's a really good point. I can see how those like unspoken expectations can just lead to resentment and just a lot of misunderstandings.
Exactly. He tells the story about a couple where the wife wanted her husband to like be more like her dad, with that formal demeanor and all that, and that caused a lot of friction because it just wasn't him.
Yeah.
So it just shows how deeply ingrained our expectations can be. And often, they come from our upbringing and our past experiences.
Yeah, it's like we're carrying around these invisible blueprints for how relationships are supposed to be without even realizing it.
Exactly. And if our blueprint doesn't match our partner's blueprint, we're setting ourselves up for disappointment. But here's the good news. While it's natural to have expectations, the real difference is the ability to communicate those expectations and to be willing to find compromise. That's what really sets successful couples apart.
So it's about acknowledging those expectations,
Yes.
right? And having those like open and honest conversations about them.
Exactly, yeah. And being willing to adapt and find solutions that work for both partners.
Yeah.
A great example is this story he tells about a wife who was so tired of doing all the grocery shopping.
Yeah.
And when she finally kind of expressed her frustration to her husband, he surprised her by becoming this like super efficient shopper. He even mastered couponing.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
That's a really good reminder that change is possible when partners are receptive to each other's needs, and it's not about one person being right and one person being wrong. It's about finding that middle ground.
Absolutely. And that shift, from resentment to positive action, it's a perfect example of what Dr. Asher is advocating for. Open dialogue, active listening, and that willingness to adapt. Now let's get into the realm of intimacy.
Okay, intimacy. That's a word that gets thrown around a lot. But what does it really mean in the context of a relationship?
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. And Dr. Asher really kind of provides a definition that goes beyond just the physical.
Right.
He describes intimacy as like feeling deeply connected and safe, but not just physically, emotionally, intellectually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's more about feeling truly seen and understood by your partner.
Yes, exactly. And he argues that, we all come into relationships with a sense of what we deserve in terms of intimacy.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's shaped by, our upbringing, past experiences, all that.
Okay, yeah.
He tells this funny story about this woman who wanted her husband to greet her at the door with the same enthusiasm that her cats did.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But it also just highlights how different our needs for intimacy can be.
It really does. It underscores how important it is to understand those needs, both in ourselves and in our partners.
Yeah.
He really encourages us to ask, like, what do I deserve?
Yeah.
What will I accept? What kind of intimacy am I seeking?
Yeah, those are important questions to kind of reflect on. Of taking inventory of your own emotional needs and then communicating those to your partner.
Yeah, exactly. And being open to hearing your partner's needs as well. And he highlights all these different types of intimacy, like, physical touch, emotional vulnerability, even things like shared intellectual pursuits, or even just creating like a unique language through shared experiences. It's about finding those things, those points of connection that create that sense of closeness.
Yeah. And he also talks about the challenges to intimacy, like the impact of, past experiences.
Yeah.
Like, for example, he tells this story about a woman whose husband just refused to take out the garbage. And his reason was that his father never did it.
Wow. It seems so trivial.
Yeah.
But it shows how these cultural and family norms can just seep into our relationships and create these barriers.
Absolutely, yeah. And those barriers can be tough to break down if we're not even aware of them.
Right.
He also talks about the impact of mental health on intimacy and points out that things like depression, anxiety, other mental illnesses, they can really affect our ability to connect with our partners.
That makes sense. Like when you're struggling internally, it's got to be hard to kind of show up, fully in a relationship.
It is. And, those negative thoughts and distortions that can come with mental illness, they can lead to, misunderstandings, distance, all that. So it's super important to seek professional help in those times, both for your own well-being and for the relationship.
Okay, so let's talk about family.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Asher really points out that family dynamics can just make or break a relationship.
They really can.
Yeah.
And he goes back to that image of the two hearts, you know.
Yeah. Just to show how different people view the the space that their partner occupies in relation to their family.
Oh.
So that feeling of being secure and included versus like threatened and excluded by your partner's family, that can have a huge impact on the relationship.
Of course, yeah.
And he shares a story about this woman who felt so much pressure to live out her mother's like unrealized business dreams, even though it wasn't her path at all, which created a lot of tension with her husband.
Wow. That's a good example of how important it is to set boundaries with family, you know.
Right.
And it's not about like cutting them off, but it's about making sure that your relationship with your partner is like, you know, the priority.
Exactly. And communicating those boundaries clearly, respectfully, all that.
Right.
He emphasizes that open communication about family expectations is so important to avoid all that, resentment and conflict.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance
Yeah.
between like honoring your family, but also nurturing your own relationship too.
You got it. And it's not just about navigating, the in-laws, but our own childhood experiences, they shape how we approach intimacy and trust in adult relationships too.
So true.
Yeah, he shares this story about Ed, this guy who was incredibly skilled at building and fixing things, but he never actually finished any projects.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out his dad had just constantly belittled his efforts, growing up. So it instilled this deep fear of judgment in him,
Wow.
which, just underscores how those early family dynamics can really affect our sense of self-worth and how we form relationships later in life.
It makes you realize how much we carry with us from our childhoods, even if we don't realize it.
We do. And those patterns, they can repeat themselves in our adult relationships if we don't, take the time to understand them, address them.
So true. It's a good reminder to kind of be mindful of our own baggage and to seek help if we need it, if we're struggling with those patterns.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's shift gears again, talk about distractions. Dr. Asher, he doesn't mince words when he talks about how easily we let distractions derail our relationships.
Oh, it's so easy. And he lists all these things: work, hobbies, social media, even children, as these potential distractions.
Let's be honest, we all have distractions.
Yeah.
Work, hobbies, endlessly scrolling through social media.
Right, yeah.
It's so easy to get sucked in.
It is. But he asks this tough question, like, what are we avoiding when we turn to those distractions? Is it possible that we're putting off those hard conversations that we need to have? Are we just using distractions to numb ourselves from feeling uncomfortable emotions?
Yeah, he encourages us to have the courage to just face those feelings, those uncomfortable feelings head on. Have those tough conversations, even when it's scary.
It can be scary, but sometimes, those simple gestures, affection, attention, they go a long way in keeping that connection strong.
Right.
Remember that couple who had that weekly no distractions communication night?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. It was their way of reconnecting and addressing any concerns.
That's such a good tip. It makes me think about how easy it is to just get caught up in the busyness of life and forget to nurture that foundation of the relationship.
It's true. It's like a plant, It needs that care and attention to thrive. Now, let's move on to another important ingredient for healthy relationships: boundaries.
Boundaries are so important, but they can be really tricky. Like, how does Dr. Asher define them?
He defines them as, those limits we set to protect ourselves and to make sure there's respect in the relationship.
Right.
He talks about all these different areas where boundaries are important: privacy, how often you communicate, family involvement, alone time, even physical touch, all of that.
Yeah. He actually gave those two contrasting examples, remember? That niece who insisted on having her own separate email account, and then the cousins who were totally fine just sharing one.
It's true. And it shows how, what works for one couple might not work for another.
Right.
And that open communication about those individual needs, it's so important.
It's about figuring out what feels right for both partners, like what's comfortable, what's respectful.
Exactly, yeah. And when those boundaries are respected, everybody feels less stressed. There's more understanding, and it creates this feeling of safety and security.
Makes sense. And he also emphasized, being aware of our partner's boundaries and respecting their needs, even if they're different from our own. It's not about imposing our own values or preferences. It's about finding that balance that honors both people.
Right. You know what? Let's lighten the mood a bit and talk about laughter.
Okay.
Because Dr. Asher really surprised me. He actually thinks that laughter might be the most important part of a healthy relationship.
Really? Laughter? I mean, it's great, but I wouldn't have put it at the top of the
I
list.
know, right? And it's not just about having fun. He actually cites research suggesting that shared laughter, it actually strengthens the bond between partners. Like it releases endorphins, reduces stress, all that.
He tells that story about the couple who use humor to, like, navigate political discussions,
Oh, yeah.
turning a potential conflict into a bonding experience.
Exactly. It's a great example of how laughter can just diffuse tension and just make things lighter, you know? But he does make a distinction between like healthy laughter and negative humor, like those passive aggressive jabs disguised as jokes.
Right, so it's about using humor in a way that, like, brings you closer together, not further apart.
Exactly, yeah. And he encourages us to share those funny moments with our partner, you know, just to lighten things up and strengthen that connection. It's about remembering why we fell in love in the first place, you know?
Right. Okay, now for the big one. Raising children.
Yeah.
How does Dr. Asher approach this?
He acknowledges how bringing kids into the picture, it just changes everything. You know, new parents are often exhausted, they have less time for each other.
Of course. Yeah.
It's a huge transition, so it's easy to see how that could cause some strain. And he really emphasizes the importance of planning and open communication to like get through that transition smoothly. Remember his advice about making a list of babysitters like before the baby even arrives, so you're ready for date nights?
Yes. Such good advice. It's so easy to get caught up in everything and just forget about the relationship.
It is. He also stresses that even amidst the chaos of being new parents, it's crucial to prioritize the relationship. He uses this great analogy. Imagine, you see a sign in a coffee shop that says, "New barista, be kind."
Yeah.
He suggests that couples with newborns should have that same mantra, new parents, be kind.
I love that. It's like a reminder to just be patient with each other,
Yeah.
especially during those sleep-deprived days.
Yeah.
And remember that you're a team.
Exactly. And he also shares this really sweet story about this husband who unexpectedly became super affectionate after their daughter was born, which just shows how children can bring out these whole new dimensions in us and our partners.
It's like, becoming parents, it can bring out different sides of ourselves.
Yeah.
And our partners, too.
It can. And he shares this observation that really stuck with me. He overheard a father calling his son mate, and the son actually corrected him and said, "No, I'm not your mate, I'm your son."
Wow.
And it's just this reminder that while our kids are such a huge part of our lives, they shouldn't replace our partners.
Right, yeah. Maintaining those clear roles within the family. It's important for everyone. Okay, so we've covered a lot here. Communication, forgiveness, expectations, intimacy, family dynamics, distractions, boundaries, laughter, children.
It's a lot.
But there's this one key area that we haven't really explored yet. Conflict.
That's right. And that's where Dr. Asher's final session focuses, on conflict management. Because let's face it, even in the healthiest relationships, there are going to be disagreements.
Right.
So how do we work through conflict without damaging the relationship?
That's a great question. It's definitely something we all struggle with.
It is, and he starts by emphasizing how important boundaries are, even during arguments. He actually keeps this note on his desk that says, "Do not blame, shame, or vilify."
Wow.
So imagine, setting that ground rule before you even start a difficult conversation.
Yeah, that's powerful. It sets the tone for, a respectful exchange,
Mhm.
even when things are heated.
You got it. And he also encourages couples to ask themselves, what's the real issue here? What's really going on?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we get caught up in those surface level arguments without actually addressing the root of the problem.
Right.
He calls it dancing, where couples kind of circle around the real issue without ever actually confronting it.
Like that couple who would argue about being late to their daughter's birthday party when the real problem was the husband's drinking.
Exactly.
It's like they were just dancing around the issue.
They were. And he says, stop dancing and just get to the heart of it. What are you really struggling with? What needs aren't being met? What emotions are driving this?
He also mentions that sometimes it's good to just agree to disagree, but he's not talking about those passive-aggressive add-ons that just keep the conflict simmering.
Right.
It's about finding a resolution where both people feel heard, even if they don't agree on everything.
Exactly, yeah.
So what strategies does he recommend for managing conflict in a healthy way?
Well, he offers a lot of practical tips, but first and foremost, don't raise your voice. If you're not feeling calm, just wait for a quieter moment, both within yourself and in the environment.
So it's about approaching the conversation with a mindset of resolution, not aggression.
Exactly. He also stresses how important it is to actually listen. Like, don't just wait for your turn to speak. Really try to understand what your partner is saying. Don't interrupt. Don't jump in with your own perspective. Just listen.
And that can be tough,
Hmm.
especially when we feel so strongly about something. It's natural to want to defend ourselves.
It is. But he reminds us that active listening is so important. It creates that space where both people feel understood. It's about showing that you care, even if you don't agree.
Yeah, that was a lot about conflict. It seems like what Dr. Asher is saying is that even disagreements can be like opportunities for growth
Yeah.
if we approach them in the right way.
Yeah, you got it. He really emphasizes that conflict, it's going to happen. It's inevitable in any relationship. But it's how we handle it. That's what really determines if it's going to bring us closer or push us further apart.
So instead of looking at conflict as a bad thing, it's a chance to like learn more about ourselves and our partners.
Exactly, and to strengthen the relationship. But even with all of these tools and insights, relationships are still hard.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Dr. Asher acknowledged that like right at the end, didn't he?
He did. He really reflected on how complex relationships are and asked the question, like, why? Why are they so challenging?
And I'm really curious, like, what was his answer?
Well, it was actually really simple. He said, we basically take two people, from totally different backgrounds, different histories, put them together and say, okay, now go live happily ever after.
It's so true. And it's funny because we often go into relationships with this like fairy tale picture in our minds. Like we expect that initial excitement to just carry us through everything.
It's true. And he reminds us that when that wears off, we're left with the realities of everyday life, different needs, desires, different ways of communicating,
Right.
different approaches to finances, sex, family, everything.
Yeah, he brought up those little everyday conflicts too.
He did.
Like, how often you want to have sex, different spending habits, how close you are to your families, and even like just picking out a sofa can be a huge disagreement.
Yeah, and it's because all of those things, they represent those underlying differences in our values and how we see the world. And Dr. Asher really emphasizes that navigating those differences, that requires real communication, honesty, a willingness to compromise, and a commitment to just understanding your partner's perspective.
So after all of this, 10 sessions, what's his like big takeaway? What's his secret? What's the secret to a happy relationship?
I don't know if there is a secret. But he does give some guiding principles. He reminds us that it's about finding ways to communicate, to work through conflict in a healthy way, and to stay connected and intimate even when things get hard.
He had those really concrete suggestions too, like making time for your own things, having your own interests, being real, being authentic,
Yeah,
and always trying to like communicate with love.
you got it.
Yeah.
He talked about how important it is to grow and change within a relationship. We have to be willing to get out of our comfort zones a bit, to see how what we do affects our partner, and to make those changes that help create harmony.
He also reminded us that to really be intimate with someone, you have to be vulnerable. Like you have to be willing to share what you're really feeling, to create that safe space for connection.
Yeah, and that takes work, especially with how busy life gets. He encouraged us to find those ways to reconnect, whether it's doing things together, having those deep talks, or just those little gestures that can mean so much.
And he said to like really cherish those inside jokes, those shared memories, all of that. That's what makes the relationship special.
Absolutely. And ultimately, just enjoy the journey, the good and the bad. It's all part of growing together.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. Dr. Asher's course has given us a lot to think about.
It really has. We've covered so much, like communication, forgiveness, expectations, intimacy, family, distractions, boundaries, laughter, kids, how to deal with conflict.
So what stands out to you the most? What are you going to take with you from all of this?
For me, it's the reminder that relationships, they do take work. You have to be willing to grow and change and embrace everything that comes with being with another person. It's hard, but so worth it.
That's a great way to put it. And as always, we encourage you to keep thinking about all of this and see what really resonated with you.
What changes could you make in your relationships? What did you learn about how you communicate, how you experience intimacy, or how you handle disagreements?
Take all of this with you and keep exploring, keep learning, keep diving deep.
We'll see you next time.